In the business world, everyone talks about having deep empathy for your customers, having a customer obsession mindset, but some of the most powerful training grounds for empathy are not built in boardrooms or by reading books, but rather they're built on the stage. In theater, actors don't just have to perform, they have to inhabit lives, belief systems, mindsets, and emotions that are not theirs. That kind of deep embodied understanding can transform how we relate to the world. Our guest today, Michael Ronen, grew up in a theatrical family in Israel, using roleplay not just to perform, but to bridge divides in real world conflict zones. Today, he brings that same mindset into business, using immersive design, synthetic users, and method acting to help leaders understand their customers, their teams, and themselves more deeply. As the founder of Wonderland Immersive Design and the creator of the Play Economy framework, Michael is showing us how performance and play can unlock something far more human in our technologies, our companies, and our futures. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. It's a very different take on what it means to have customer empathy, and we're learning it from the people that are best at truly having empathy for someone else, actors and the world of theater. So I hope you guys enjoy this conversation, and please subscribe if you haven't yet. Really helps this channel, and thank you for listening. You easily top the best background out of all the conversations I've had. It's not even a virtual background. Literally, where are you right now?
I'm in Topanga. It's a canyon next to Malibu in Los Angeles area. And I've been living here now for 5 years with my family.
It's amazing. I really want to be there, honestly. It looks
I think
beautiful.
we all deserve to be here or in places that everyone.
Most definitely. So, Michael, what do we need to understand about your story to know why you're doing what you're doing right now?
I recently had a conversation with a friend and he said, "Oh, in Los Angeles, you need an origin story. This is how people buy into what you do." And I thought, that's funny. The first time we met, you told me you were moving out of Israel, moving to London and then Berlin, and you were working with artists from conflict areas. And I remembered you, wow, you were this guy doing conflict zone. So I guess that's my origin story.
To start off with, you working in theater, in art, and specifically around conflict resolution. What did that teach you? Just take us back to the days when you were doing that. Where were you? What was happening? What got you interested in that?
I was living in East London. It was 2 years after I moved out of my homeland, Israel, and didn't really know when I'm going to turn back and go back. I've been in Latin America, I've been in Paris, and I ended up in London because my father, as a theater director, always spoke about the English theater. For him, it was where it all originated. And his mentor was an English theater director who came in the 70s to Jerusalem and worked with Israeli young actors on creating collective group theater. And that became a really unique space in the theater scene in Israel in that time. It was political, it was uncompromising space. And the 73 Yom Kippur War happened, and this Englishman left Israel, and my father became the artistic director in a very young age. So it shaped him, and in a way, it shaped me. You know, we are another version of our parents. So I was going with this myth to London with the hope to use theater as a medium. Theater, for me, I grew up in theater. My parents, a theater director father, a theater actress mother. I joke that, you know, when my mother was with me at home, cooking and rehearsing her lines for the show in the evening, I didn't know if it's my mother or the character of Molière, right? So, and when my father, you know, when there was no babysitter, after all, you know, theater people, they don't make a lot of money. They make the joy comes from the doing, right? It's like it's not a profession you go to become rich, especially not in a small country like Israel. They were very dedicated, so sometimes they would take me to work and I would stand behind the stage and I will see my mom become someone else. I'll see my dad sits there in the audience in an empty stage and he tells people to come and go. And I'll sit there in the backstage and everybody would know me. And it could be a scary play. It could be like, remember Michael Colas was like about a man that goes in a fight against the regime and he burns all villages. And it's like a really scary play. And there were like skeletons and the angel of death. And I'm sitting there and I'm seeing this angel of death terrifying. And then I'm seeing this guy goes out from to backstage, takes out the mask, and says, wow, this game. And the same the other way, you see people like joking around and suddenly entering the stage and becoming someone else, and seeing this magic in a way from backstage and how it affects the silent partner, the audience that comes in on that premiere day and later to the shows. The effect of 500 people laughing together in the same space, you kind of feel, I would say, the same as the child of a heart surgeon takes you to the hospital. I always thought about like a theater, like the hospital of the soul, like people come from their crisis, from their broken worlds. The room blacks out at 8 o'clock and they all forget about it. And they look at the stage and then the actors, they're a bit like medics, but on the battlefield because they have no other choice. They're going out there. They will be hurt. Their guts will fall on stage. They know that if they are good actors, they are used to the fact that it involves their own emotion. So they do that, and by doing that, they heal the audience that cannot do it. So they participate in this action. So that's how the origin story starts for me in those type of experiences.
What did theater? Did you also act?
Yeah, so I started in like living in this family, and then my sister, I have an older sister, she went into an art school for high school, a bit like fame, and I also wanted really like, so I went into this high school and that changed my life. It's called Tal Mayalin. It's a high school in the center of Israel that kids go from all around the country because at the age of, you know, 14 to 18, you could either be in, visual arts or theater or dance, ballet, or jazz or classical music, and you really develop those skill sets in an early age. Yeah, I think I had the best high school experience in the world. I directed theater shows in the age of 18. I directed Train Spotting. I was like dealing with serious theater in an early age and playing cabaret, and it was very common in our family. That's what everyone would talk about around the table. My sister became later a writer director. So obviously when, I thought, I would finish high school and later, I'll become a theater maker. What's interesting is that in Israel, that especially for men, this gap between high school and university, those 3 years of compulsory army service, they're like another universe, right? And that's a conversation one can have for hours. But in essence, many people don't understand around the world that part of the concepts of what Israel makes as a state, that everybody feels like this bond, right? It's like we take care of ourselves. Nobody took care of us before we had the state. That's the myth Israel is based on. It's like, the ship to the slaughter in Europe for the Holocaust, we here created something else. And that's why the army is so engraved in the civil society, because of this myth of we were persecuted for hundreds of years and, this state's supposed to be our home. Me growing up with a Zionist grandfather, right, who built kibbutz and so on, I was very influenced in an early age by that. But the high school of the arts suddenly created another discourse. So for me, it's very interesting that there is like this awareness and, you become a thinking, creative soul, and suddenly you have to go into the army. So anyone who saw the movie Hair knows this scene where the hippie is going to change his friend for a few days in his camp. They're gonna like swap clothes, but accidentally the hippie is being sent to Vietnam, right? He's mistaken, and that's how I felt like this transition was for me, from doing arts to suddenly being sent to be a soldier in an army, pacifist coming from an artist family. And I couldn't really claim in that age, yes, conscience objection or any type of like mental things, because I was very much in consensus with the system in those days, and I didn't want to provoke neither my parents and my sister, or everyone were part of that. So I went along. But the moment I joined in, the second Intifada started, and I literally had 3 years where I was, participating in something that I didn't want to take part in, which is very complicated. It's a very, very complicated thing to state like that. But it took me politically, consciously, the understanding, um, years only later to kind of understand that, you have your narratives and you have your consensus and you don't want to break it. And when you start feeling ill, I was literally physically ill during this time many times, and you really, it goes into your systems because something is not aligned. Anyone read Joseph Heller Catch-22 would understand how complicated it is to say, if you say you're crazy in the army, you can't be crazy because somebody did. So this whole idea of like what it means to go out during wartime. And I was, in the end of it, I think that I carried that very strongly when I left, and I also created my own film in the last year and 2 years after following that. I had to bring out, not because I wanted to be a film director, because it was specifically the medium I knew during those times when I couldn't do any performing arts.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
on that front, you are basically in a family full of theater.
theater.
Like
Yeah.
everyone is living and breathing it in different ways. And then there's a bigger cultural norm. So that's your family system. And then the bigger cultural norm in Israel is that people, at least guys, have to enlist in the army. And
I mean, everyone, guys go for 3 years, women go for 2.
okay, so everyone is. And now you're in a completely different environment in some ways, and you see the differences in your beliefs or your belief systems, and what you're partaking in and the everyday actions you're sort of taking. What about conflict, I guess, interests you to express that in as a medium?
The army and generally the whole war experience for me was the complete antithesis to what I've been living before, because it's all about creativity and stage. It's about creating world. And what's so interesting, I was always taught that in a stage you need a conflict. For a play to be good, you need a good conflict. If all characters agree, it's not interesting to see. Comedy, tragedy, it's all the same. You need this conflict between the characters. We have, and I knew that, but in the army, in the reality of war, this is destructive. There's nothing productive about war. And I think being a veteran and the people who participate and take action in war in the name of a lot of other people, everyone who ever takes part, everyone who pay tax is participating in war. It's just that you're not specifically there, but veterans are there. And I think that veterans have this perception of reality, that they've seen what Coppola, in his movie Apocalypse Now, the documentary is called The Heart of Darkness, because really, like, that's what you see in war. There's nothing pretty about humanity in this situation. It's not logical. So I guess I'm some type of an empath who saw and grew up in creativity and then saw and existed in this heart of darkness. So when I left that, I felt like a big calling to figure out a way to communicate this creative force and exchange this way we express our darkest spaces in war in other places on stage. So that kind of leads to what happened when I moved to London, and I formed basically a company, an artistic collective of artists from Conflict Zone called Conflict Zone Arts Asylum. Started as a theater group, a Conflict Zone theater, where I was studying in Lambda, very, kind of middle class English school. I studied directing, and there was this opportunity to pitch a project to the Deutsche Bank. And I thought, why don't bring a group of artists from conflict zones? Because not only I experienced this at the army when I left, and I suddenly I'm working in England. I'm now meeting in a bar where I work in Spitalfield Market in Brick Lane. I meet people from Palestine and Lebanon and Serbia and Kosovo, and we all work in a bar. One in the kitchen, one in the cook. We, end of day, we drink, we play, we talk about the absurdity of where we come from and our traumas, and I was already in the state of mind that I'm not going to cheer for Israel in this forum. I'm like, I'm upset. And they were also upset. The Syrian was really upset with Assad. Everyone were upset with their circumstances. And we all came from different realities, but suddenly there was this common ground that was very interesting for me. So I thought it would be interesting to take this moment here and go deeper with an artist group. I was very influenced by Peter Brook. He was this theater director who lived in the 70s, 80s, did a lot of collective theater making and shows that went deep into mythologies like the Mahabharata and were creating experiences with different cultures looking at that. So I tried to apply for funding, which I didn't get. And I tried to apply for funding from the British Council, which I also didn't get. But finally, I had a mentor, Catherine Hunter, who worked at the Complicity Theater with Simon McBurney, and she said, I really believe what you do will bring you to the young Vic, and the director of Finborough Theatre, a small theater that had amazing shows like Shopping and Fucking and other type of brilliant productions, said, yeah, I want to bring you to direct. And I started getting some people who believed in that, and that's how Conflict Zone Theater production was born. And that took a few nice years of my life on directing, producing, and working with this ensemble.
Why do you think theater is, especially around bringing different cultures and conflicts in different cultures together, why do you think that is important in the world we are in right now?
Well, that comes to kind of fast forward to today, to what I call is what the zeitgeist calls for. We're living in this economy of fear. We need to change it to an economy of play. So we need to zoom in to our ability to be someone else. And that's what's so special about being a person working in theater or being an actor is people think about actors as people who lie, who pretend. But this whole concept of what Stanislavski and Myers and Lee Strasberg call method acting, I think every actor feels it because the moment that you become someone else, it zips into you. In the world of what's called LARPing, live action role play. No, in the States, people hit each other in LARPing, but actually in Nordic countries, it's a real emotional kind of exploration space. People play different scenarios, and part of it is the idea of bleeding, like the character after the play bleeds into your personality. So if you play the confident boss, you feel a little bit more confident after play. That's why people play. Especially introverts, funnily enough, find it a really healing space. So the same idea is in theater. It gives us the ability to zoom out, because I always say we look for technologies and we try to reach to the stars and fix everything. But actually the most important technology we didn't really figure out is sitting here. I mean, between our mind and our heart and our guts. I mean, we don't really even know how to explain it, what makes us human and conscious and so interesting that we can feel things and it stores in us and it moves in generation. We have generational fears and traumas moving between us. So we have those collective stories. We don't really know how to explain that. Still, we talk a lot about artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence, where most of us are quite emotional, not so intelligent. So
How would you, if you were to kind of lay the groundwork for this framework you came up with around the play economy, how would you describe intelligence, first of all? What does it mean to be intelligent?
yeah, and it's such a good question, because how do you define your calling in this life? Be intelligent toward what? Right? A lot of people see it it's being life smart and figuring out how to navigate, but it's must be you're part of something bigger and there's a bigger calling. So here there's religious people studying all day. They're like, there's something there. There's like some connection we might not know. We live in, you know, this kind of secular religious paradigm, but like what's, you know, what to say that there is something in this experience that we haven't really explored of make believe, the idea of immersing ourselves in a world. And I go back to theater and these words of Shakespeare, which is a religion for many people. The world is a stage and every person is a player, right?
Mm.
There's something here that my father says we play all the time. We're all the time in a sense of play. We use masks because we talk differently with our partner, with our kids, with our colleagues. We use different tones, different actions. An actor plays a character. They know the character has an objective and it has micro actions and bits to get to this objective. And that's how we move our day. And a theater play sets the rules. And that's kind of like as we wake up, Joe Dispenza speaks about how you create who you are and tells you your narrative. You boot your iOS kind of, and you immediately says you're this and you're that. That's the facts about you. That's my phone.
So you said something interesting right now. You said we use the world as stage, but we use in theater, you're trying to get to an outcome of embodying this person or embodying these beliefs and trying to change yourself. And in that way, from that lens, intelligence is the ability to understand the context you're in
Yes,
and be able to mirror that very effectively. Would you say
right.
that?
And you know what's really beautiful? I researched a lot on the history of play and you know how play. And there are some books. One of them is called Homo Ludens, the playing man, the playing human, right? And it marks some interesting elements about play, right? Observation, also scientific kind of observation of play. First, that it creates order in the chaos because actually as kids if you see the idea that I have like 9 years and 4 years and you can see along the years how they simulate scenarios that are about to happen and they simulate scenarios where they repeat something they saw. So we're going to the airport, they already in the day before they'll do the suitcase and they'll do the check-in and all the things kids find very peculiar and unique in airports, every unique experience. So they kind of do it at home. They, they go back from school. They want you to be the teacher and someone else to be a kid because they want to simulate back what happened to you. So there's something very natural in play. And then in this book, we learn that throughout history, play was marginalized. It was seen as something that threatens the status quo and the order, right? Medieval times, anything with plant medicine and witchery and all those elements we know have become, right, like absolute. And then later you see also in the industrial time, that, you know, when you suddenly have the people need to go into the factory to sit on the and stand on the assembly line. Later, they need, before they need to sit in school to prepare to the assembly line already with the tables. So play, you know, don't play with your food. Don't play around. Like work, don't play. Like not to talk later about foreplay or anything connected to this, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah,
You brought out something super interesting. I think we are when we go across life in different stages. We start off in school, and there is an element when you're young, where when you're just a kid, 4 or 5 years old. You're playing around. You're playing around with the people. You're taking on different characters, and you're not so rigid with the person you are in the way you show up on a day-to-day basis. You could just change completely and act a certain way. You actually take, even when a kid's getting angry, they're just fully embodying that anger as well. If they're getting sad, they're fully embodying the sadness as well. Whereas when you get into into this education system, at some point you start, it's more about consensus, and it's more about how you are in the same environment, and kind of mirroring the other people, rather than still figuring out what it is within you that you can kind of show up as. Same thing in work environments. Like, you end up doing the same thing. It's like there's collective, and you're abiding by some rules that are defined, and you're kind of using those rules to play within that game. But there's an individual play. I know you have some thoughts on this, so go ahead.
no, Exactly, you're right. You have your individuality and then you're being put into a play, you're being cast into a play that you didn't spend time crafting or co-writing at least. And then you're literally living this play for most of your life. That's the play now in different variations of the play. It's not really your origin fluid play. And it's really unique that we come to times where play could be re-understood because, and that's interesting, this is very uncertain times. What is the most valuable skill set someone can have in those times or the times that come?
Being able, I mean, for me, it's to be able to learn whatever you need to learn and embody that for the time that you're in.
Exactly, be agile. So,
Yeah.
Yuval Noah Harari, who wrote *Sapiens*, talk about the ability to now be fluid and agile, like when you were a kid. And how did you do that? By jumping in. I mean, my life is kind of crazy. I move for continents. I move between different radical spaces and like careers, and it's not easy and it's not safe. But it's been quite fluid because I had the ability to kind of, zap into the situation. And maybe it's too adventurous. But definitely, those are the times we're entering. We are entering very uncertain times. So this ability is a very important ability to zoom into. And I will add that in the times of the AI, robota in Russian is robot, right? Robot is coming from work. Robota in Russian is work. So the idea that the robota, robot is taking our robota, it's basically what are we left for? What can humans do? If we if we don't have our work that is 80% of our wake time, if we like what makes us who we are, if that in a moment we're not necessary. We were never really meant to do the assembly line, the Excel sheets, the tabs. It didn't feel natural to sit all the time for our neck, Homo sapiens in front of a screen and like kind of try to do this feels much more natural to be this, to be that, and those technologies are enabling this.
Then what do we do, Michael, in these times? You're saying that the world where we're headed in, we don't know if our job, the things we're doing, are going to exist a year or two, whatever that number might be, years from now.
Right.
What do we look to? What are the questions we should ask ourselves then? And kind of tie it back to your play economy framework if you can.
Yeah, it all goes back to mindset and values. And honestly, I mean, I don't know. I'm a theater guy who worked in tech, but it's my mindset to play economy. I'm not like an academic or a supermarketeer who coins a phrase that now everyone should follow. It worked for me, and I think that we're really in a crisis of trust and not far away from civil wars in so many places. And we have to understand that technology has been accelerating it. The human gap between us have actually accelerated, and you see it very easily with social media and the whole conversation around in the movie Social Dilemma about functions that in order to get attention, with the commodity in those spaces is attention, our attention, you have to give content that polarizes. And if we want to step out of the misuse we have with technology, we have to do a mindset change. For me, I know my focus is to work with founders because founders, the creators of tomorrow's culture, right? Most people,
Why do you
if you
say
think
that?
about why, I was a culture guy. I was doing theater and I moved to tech because I saw YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and I said, what? I'm doing a show about conflict resolution for 200 people in a fringe theater in Edinburgh. And those dudes that, basically grew up in a little spoiled bubble, which is great. I want everything to be spoiled bubble, but like they don't know a lot about culture and emotional intelligence. And they are now running the show because they've created medium spaces, vehicles for other people to participate. And I was actually very upset on theater when I kind of moved more into tech because I thought it's too luxurious, it's too privileged in a sense, and not just because it's like it has the privilege to do art. I don't think so. I think we should have the privilege to do art. I just thought that there's a disconnect with people. A little bit like you can claim against the left head towards the right in many ways. What brought to this kind of populist right is that there was a disconnect, and again it has to do with this gap of understanding and empathy. There was no real participatory empathy. Theater was kind of like what's called the sofa theater. Like you sit in the 80s, 90s in England, and you see like a good, well-made play, like Virginia Woolf or anything like this, and you're just comfortable. So I was very interested in breaking the fourth wall, doing immersive theater, interactive, because I thought that's where theater should go, but it still stayed really fringe in theater. So I thought, excuse my language, fuck it, I'll go to technology where you have really influence on people's culture. So yeah, Silicon Valley is the new age kind of cultural institute.
You say sofa theater, but that's exactly what we're in right now too, in its own way. It's sofa theater, but at your home, with the theater being your phone and these apps being where the play is happening. And you say conflict resolution, it's conflict based theater, and it's the same thing. People are looking at things in front of them on their phones from their sofas, and now they're watching different plays, but those plays are just shorter and they create more angst and anxiety, and that's what's rewarded as well. So it's come full circle in some ways. I
So,
mean,
and
it's
who
a
is exactly, and who is the artistic director of those experiences? Who takes care of us being consumed by this content every time we want a moment in our life in the bathroom or in the to have escapism from this reality that feels right, and then where is the mindset and the values behind those founders using those technologies to create our culture? So for myself, what I'm really interested in is to work with those founders and to think about what does play economy mindset means to you, right? First, what does play and role play means to you? How can you apply it in your business? In a startup, in a business, you usually have three important stakeholders. The first and the most important stakeholder is your customer. There's no justification for a business without a customer, right? And we tend to think products are free. They're never free. We always give something in return. It's like our attention, Facebook, WhatsApp, and so on and so on. So again, thinking about this mindset that if the customer is your most important stakeholder and your business is a canvas, is a stage, and now you're like a detective putting the profiles, right? So who is it? Like put a picture, describe it to yourself, understand this persona, and then do what a method actor does, become this persona. We know the Airbnb founders, they thought they are doing some, bed and mattress startup. They started an experiment. They hosted people, and they understood that the most important element is trust. When you bring foreign people strangers to your house, when you are going to stranger's house, you want to see reviews. So they created reviews and they created a trustworthy community. Howard Schultz with Starbucks, he went to study the Italian coffee culture. Travis with Uber drove the Uber. So we know that you need to be the founder, so you need to be the customer in order to give them a solution. Some founders start with their own problem and build a business around that, but still, almost always, there's a disconnect from the customer. And what I see those times in this zeitgeist, the disconnect from the customer happens really fast, and people don't know why. Oh, this message didn't come through. And so I think that it's in business ways, those are times that we need uber sensitive towards our customer feeling and really have our finger on the pulse. If you look at Campbell, there's a concept called the hero's journey, right? The hero's journey you see in the Odyssey or in Star Wars, right? Like the hero is starting his life, ordinary life, in their day-to-day place. And then there is this moment of the call to action. And it could be like when you meet the guide for the first time. Now, the way this is different from the normal customer journey is usually customer journeys are like funnel. You look at the business in the center and the customer come in and they go through and it's almost like they go through and they go away, and it doesn't matter the touch point, if it's acquisition, engagement, retention, referral, right, revenue, you're always abusing them. That's why I don't like so much the word user in tech. Usually it would be customer or consumer. In technology, it's user. And, the hook, with all the respect, how to hook a user. A synonym for user in the English language is an enjoyer. Let's start using it, because to use someone, it's a drug user that creates the relationship. So I'm reframing it. So we said our customer is the protagonist. We are the guide in the protagonist's journey for their own well-being. They are taking care of themselves. We are here, come and tell, hey, there's a direction, there's something you can do to make your life better. They need to cross this threshold. They need to do the commitment. They need to be consistent. We talk about retention, like why don't they come back? Because how is it helping them? So really like to think about your interaction with them as a guide, and then their journey that they go through with your product to their own well-being makes a much more purposeful, responsible, ethical economy.
Do you think that you can apply this? I mean, the core of this is to really develop very deep empathy, completely put yourself in their shoes, literally embody them. But do you think for founders, there's certain questions they can ask themselves before they even go into what kind of customer to solve this for? Maybe they're better at truly understanding a certain kind of person. Obviously, we can probably understand people that are similar to us better just because of how we see ourselves in them. What about the people that we just don't see are similar to us?
So this is the interesting point generally about us humans. We think we are not the same, but we go through emotional experiences that are the same emotional experiences. Even the biggest enemies. So that's the point of view of a method actor. You say, well, how do I play a serial killer? How do I play a Nazi? How do I play? So you say, okay, I need to treat them as an equal human being that have the same feeling, right? Even if it's impossible to do. That's the standing ground. And now I'm starting to emulate and create, embody this character with situations that are close to my heart. So I start where I know, but I will slowly start drifting to areas that are completely outside my comfort zone. But I would always keep this relation to my memory. So Stanislavski call it emotional memory. That we can basically, with specific gestures and specific actions, we can go back to a memory, and vice versa. We remember something, it suddenly affects our body. We smell something, we immediately feel like, oh, we are there, we are back in this place. How can you explain this?
What are tactical ways that they can develop this mindset?
Right. So I call it like the customer obsession bootcamp. I'm basically, the first thing is I'm saying, okay, who do you need to play, right? You play the casting director, you understand your business is the stage, you're the guide to the protagonist, all this mindset. Then you say, who are you actually serving? So the moment you chose them, you start the research process. And the research process in method acting is very methodic. And with customer research is the same. So you do all the normal work that not everyone know, from design thinking, empathy map, right? What does my customer say? What do they do? What do they feel? What do they think? I map it out. I ask them to do vision boards where they put images of what the customers see from the moment they open their eyes in the morning until the moment they go to sleep and close their eyes. What do they see? What do they see in their environment? You see where I live? Like this, I wasn't living there always. Like this is new to me, but it affected me a lot. Environments affect us tremendously. If you work in a co-working space, if you work at home, if you work in a factory floor, you cannot build something to customers you have not experienced their physical space. So after you map out those places, you go and experience moments there. So you at least know how it feels. You know, if you work with people who work in coal mines, you can't not be there and spend some good time there and understand the experience. So it has to start from the environment. And then, in those pictures we'll do of what they see, we'll also see partners, it's relationship. Try doing like an app for parents and using the app while holding a crying baby, just like
Mm.
ask your friends to babysit their child and take care of the child while using the app. You have to come closer if you're doing something for people who it's like it's a gym app, and you have to go to an overcrowded gym and experience this suffering and understand the position where your customers are coming from. So it's really like using your product in the right context, and even without your product, just before the problem arrived, understand their environments. He was shopping in Whole Foods, and then he was going running, and then he came home, and then he took out my dishwasher soap and put it in there, right? So this is where it comes in the order of things of the persona in my side. So really to do the vision board, to go to the places, to live the experiences, then to do what they call a soundboard, which is like a playlist with the music the customer might be listening, and it's one specific persona. Another persona might have completely different music. The sound that they will be hearing, they are living next to a train station, like it affects your mind. And then after I have all this, I place them on what I call the hot seat. Now, the hot seat is something you can do with a facilitator. You can ask a partner to do it. And it's basically a pressure pot where you're being placed in the middle, being asked a lot of questions, and you need to answer immediately. It's like in improvisation when you say yes and.
Hmm.
If you know or not know the answer, it doesn't matter. You have to go for it. And you see as you do it, oh, this feels really off. I don't really know enough about my customer to solve it. It's okay. It's not that you lied, you improvised, you tried, but you created a narrative. Maybe you don't feel that it's the right one. You need to go back to the user research. You have to do the customer interview. You have to do the persona building. It doesn't replace it. It just allows you to come to insights that are experiential, intuitive, and based on your feelings and not only the data.
You need to be the customer, but at the same time, observe the customer.
Yeah, you do everything. Like there's the intuit shadow the customer. You can go behind them and see what they're doing. You can literally do a customer interview. When I create the customer obsession training, I look at first the mindset, that you have the mindset of becoming them. And then in terms of tools, the other thing that I'm getting into is that AI is actually really good in helping us improve our EI, emotional intelligence. Some call it EQ. Yeah. But the idea that AI is there to help us on this customer obsession, let's say, journey. First, I like the idea that as we role play by ourselves, AI can also role play by itself. This is called synthetic users or synthetic personas. A few years ago, there was a publication. Now we can already see some new startups coming in. Rally.io, synthetic users is one of them, artificial societies. And those are basically virtual focus groups. Those are personas that are built around existing huge database. Imagine all of Reddit, right? Or Hacker News, or all our customer interviews we've done. They've already did research that if you take hours of customer interviews and you feed it to an LLM and you train it, you could have 85% of accuracy on future predictions and simulations, meaning that you are able now to have a really cheap focus group that you can contact any given moment and ask questions about your audience right now, right? If you connect it to social listening tools, you have the ability to really have your finger on the pulse of the market and always know what your customer prefers. So with artificial societies, you can really design your LinkedIn post, and with Rally, you can try to do posts with your community. This is really early stage startups, but it's interesting that we are now in this age that you can have AI role play for you, which is basically it has the data of the character and it thinks, if I was this character, what would I say? What would I do? What would I like? And do it in scale. So you have whole focus groups of those. So go ahead.
I was watching this interview with the founder of DoorDash, Tony, and he was talking about how when they started DoorDash, it was them going to restaurants, and they were going to these small, one chain, two chain restaurants, and they would basically ask the person, the manager there, like, what do you do every day? Like, just give us like a list of every single thing that you do every day. And they were just there throughout the day, spending the entire day with them. And what they noticed was this one mom and pop shop. I mean, you aren't in that position when you're a mom and pop shop to like reject orders. You want to get as many orders as you want, but they realize that these mom and pop shops are rejecting multiple orders every day because these orders were coming in for like as a delivery request. They wanted the person to deliver this food to their house, and they just did not have the people in store to be able to deliver these places, these food orders to the house. And they were like, well, like, they asked the manager, why are you like letting go of these? These are like hundreds of dollars worth of orders that you would make hundreds of dollars every day. And they were like, we just don't have the capacity. And that's literally the insight they had for DoorDash, was like, well, there's restaurants that are currently leaving money on the table that they very much need, but they just don't have the capacity. So can we bring a third party person, a person that is driving a car, to just fulfill these orders? But the only way they were able to reach that conclusion inside was by literally spending days with them and being right next to them, and then seeing this very very, very absurd thing. So it's a very real example of your
Yeah, I
customer
mean,
obsession.
it's like you could. It reminds me, I did once a theater show where the audience comes in and the show was supposed to be about the people who sit in this coffee. The coffee was in Berlin, an area of a lot of migrants, what's called like second generation Turkish guest workers came into Germany, and they all sit in those neighborhood cafes, people playing and talking about news, playing cards. And the Germans that were basically new to this and new to this culture had different preconception about this place, so they never entered there. And the idea of the shows were to try and bring the audience to come in. And some directors choose to move out the audience, the people who sit in the cafe and do the whole show. And I thought it would be weird, so I just left the cafe as is. I just took one table and created earphone experience where when you place the earphone, you're being said you're Mehmet, you're 40, you came here in the 60s, you're the owner of the cafe. On your left is Ahmed, is 18, and on your right is Silo, is 23. They're your friends, you're playing cards. Take your cards, throw it on the table and say, come on, play. So it gives you the whole backstory and then puts you in the situation, you play out the situation. And the four people who come in, what is this place? What do they sell drugs here? They come in, they sit on the table, they use the earphones, and suddenly they become the people in the cafe. So I was sitting here, the director, looking at this space and saying, it's so really interesting what's happening here. They're playing them, and they might not know it, but they feel it, that they are actually now part of the landscape. And the people who play here every day, they ignore them because, well, they just basically feel like part of the space. So it's not even, and I was the only one kind of observing the situation from the outside, and thought this is really interesting because that's the way to consume someone's experience and to become them, to go to their space, like you said with DoorDash, and to also live their experience. I would say there's the follow them and shadow them experience, but there's also go there and work there and live their experience and go through it. And it's not always possible. That's where like the idea of method acting comes in, because you can do it in a more kind of simulated way in your mind, and you can practice with AI. That's where the next level of role play, like we said, human can role play alone, right? AI can role play alone, synthetic users, but what happens when they play together? So this is all the role play simulations we're seeing. And we've seen it for years. There's companies like ELB and, pitch masters doing team training, and pitch masters doing like sales training, second nature, customer relationship training. And big companies are now doing contracts to train their customer service with, angry AI agents that tell them, I don't understand what I'm doing. And you are practicing how to answer that. And the AI listens and it analyzes your emotional sentiment and the tonality in your voice. And it gives you a score. And it says, now do it again. The French word for rehearsal, a theater rehearsal, is répétition. It's basically to repeat. The idea of rehearsal and play in its core, to learn something, to prepare for something, is to also do it again and again. And by that, master the skill and know how to become agile. Now I get this answer, I already practiced for it, so I know how to respond. Or I played your perspective, I understand how you're feeling, so I know where to come towards you.
Now, obviously, when you're building a company and you're very early in the process, there's one stakeholder that's your customer, but then there's the internal stakeholders. There's people in your team.
Investors and team, right? So, like I said, there's three stakeholders. There's the customers, there's the investors who give life to a business, and there's the early founders, co-founders, and team who operate the business and make it function and flourish. So, how do you use the same concept towards them? So I give you an investor. I came from the world of theater. In the beginning, when I came to, I remember in Berlin to venture capitals for my first startup. So my first startup was about virtual time capsules. I wanted to make the world a stage. I want every place to remember people who cross by and share their stories, so people could make media that is location bounded. It's basically location based exclusive. You come there, you can listen to the song during sunset. You come here and you can hear the history of this sculpture because you're next to it. It's like giving context to media that is relevant to the people around it. And it was interesting idea, but early days, 2012, not so much even video content on mobile. And I come and I speak with venture, and I'm the theater guy, the director. And again, play is not being taken seriously. And that's part of the economy's problem. So I was like laughed out, and especially in Europe, not so much risk taking. And, I did a crowdfunding, I did state funding, I found other ways to bring it to the audience. In the end, I wasn't attentive enough to what customers want and could, right? So even with the funding I got, I think it didn't reach where it could have. Maybe it was early technology, but also, again, that's where I learned the hard way that you have to become your customer and really live their experience. But then I did have a startup that got funded later in the VR space. I did a VR app that you can capture 360 videos on your app, and it won South by Southwest. And in the competition, I remember I was on the stage. I already knew I spoke with some great investors that are on board, and this pitch was kind of like sealing it. But there was a lot in stakes. If I would lose this competition, maybe the investors who wanted to back me would go out of the round. And the most difficult thing in an investment round is to get the lead, which is again based on trust. So I was standing there on the stage and I was pitching this app, and one of the judges was from Google, and the app was only on Apple and iOS. And he asked me in the Q&A, it's like, I don't understand. 80% of the market is using Android. Why are you not on Android? And it was clear that the technology was specifically just possible right now on iOS. Instagram only started on iOS. It was clear that it's like he's trying to test me. And for this zikful moment, I just entered his point of view, saw him sitting there from the audience looking at me. I kind of entered his perspective and saw myself on stage and thought, what is he playing? What does he want from there? And I answered, please send my sincere apology to Google. The audience burst out laughing. He was laughing. Everybody was laughing. It was obviously like, okay, I'm sorry, I can't be on Android. But the scenario was, it was a moment of understanding what he wants for the situation. I won the competition. I mean, Google didn't invest, but it was not on the horizon. The idea was like, how do you empathize with where the investor is coming from in the situation, in the moment? It's all about human relationship, especially in early seed. Like, it's about you, the founders, and what is your origin story and how would you work together. Everything else is assumption. It's all about how well would you work in early stage startups. So you need to give these people their trust, and you need to understand where they are coming from, because they will be partly your partners in this long-term relationship. So you have to, be there and literally ask the question like you would ask your future partner, if that you're sincere about this relationship. So that's how role play came really into practice with investor relationships.
I mean, I feel a lot of the success that a company creates when it comes to building a product that people generally want and love has to do with a great team as well. So, can you talk a little bit more about how do you align a team towards a common goal?
Right. So here's the thing. For years, especially during the pandemic, I was doing a lot of social play online, and there were a lot of remote teams. And what makes us want to work? We want to be together. And suddenly these virtual spaces, it's not like really working together. We are working to fulfill ourselves, but most of us are working for the social environment. That's like, we are social beings. This is so important. So I was working exactly in this transition between the physical social grounds, the playgrounds, to suddenly this virtual one. So I was doing a lot of remote team activations, and it worked well with, making people do really weird things on Zoom through play. Basically role playing your broken object from your home or something like that, and answering as this brought laughter, icebreakers, and everything that you wanted for a team. But it wasn't enough. And it's interesting because now I understand that through focusing a team around the customer, you really align everyone around the core of why this business exists from the first place. So many people forget, again, that the core of the business is to serve the customers, and that's why it exists there. And it doesn't have any justification without it. So when you make activities like I do cosplay competition, or actually, like trivia, who knows their customer better, who can act out their customer better, who can fill out their customer better, like just to create those gamification elements in companies around the culture of becoming a customer and being customer obsessed. I think that's a great way to align teams. And the other thing is really to remember that in this environment, we are here not just for the work, we're really here for the social experience. So to ask yourself, what elevates the social experience of the people in the company? Everybody talk about, a company builds community, but how are you building community inside your organization? And we still see, in the end of the day, that this fear economy is built on a hierarchy. And we I was very excited when Web3 and DAOs started to become a thing, and I was really hoping that we will see more companies that have this decentralized form of decision making, and some companies are better than others. But with this decentralized system, there must be also some ways to engage culture and the social aspect of people working together. And most of those decentralized beings are also remote. So it's again like, how do you keep the balance? I know some very successful remote teams are actually working a lot on the in-person retreats and events, because that really keeps, in between one physical meeting to another, the spirit moving. I think there's more in the so there's like gamification, which is like the gamification of work. You get leaderboard, you win, you don't, right? Like, so you have it. But I like the word playification. So I like the idea of playifying workplace. And what does it mean beyond just a ping pong table? It's like, how do you allow spaces where role play and elements around simulation are allowed? It's not for nothing that the Star Trek Enterprise have a special room for simulations called the holodeck, right? There's a reason this spaceship traveled so much, because the holodeck allowed the team, the members, to have recreational time where they can cope with reality. So again, we go back to where this conversation started, how important is playing our childhood, and how much we need it more in the meeting room, in the workspace, and how as business owners, especially businesses that are not just startups, but they're big companies, how can we dedicate more space for simulation inside our companies? Because like the next level of simulation is really giving people more agency on their future. We are so future illiterate. We don't feel we have any agency. We don't think our vote matters. We don't think our voice matters. And we have to change it about people. We also have to change how the flow of information of what is real and what really affects us. Because there's all this like now legacy media, kind of independent media battle, when we are fucked in the middle because it's like it doesn't serve us to get like half truths and like, yeah, free journalists giving us lies. Like we need a way to be involved in what's happening around us. And I think simulation, this concept of participatory future organization like Nesta in the UK are working around giving more agencies to communities by simulating almost with role play, LARPing scenarios. And I think there's a whole movement in, LARPing for social change, that you can really give people the perception of how it would feel like if there would be a flood, if there would be a fire, if there would be an emergency. And this needs to be more promoted around schools and around organization and corporates as a mean to prepare for this unknown future, and also as a way to diffuse the huge tensions that are currently standing between us.
Yeah, I love that. Few more questions for you. And so one around, you talked about if the teams are focused on the customer and everyone's aligned around focusing on the customer, you can get people together towards a singular goal. What I've noticed in when this plays out is that everyone is wanting for the customer experience or retention and people to come back, but the way that they want to do it is different based on where you're at, which team you're in. So a sales team can think differently about what the customer really needs, and then the product team can be thinking differently about it. So they have different ways of explaining and communicating the same thing about what the customer needs. Can you help in understanding how do we prioritize then? How do priorities work in such environments? Because I feel
So
like
there's
that
two,
is what disrupts a lot of the communication.
right. I think there's two things here. First one is like, how deep do we all know the customer? And that's something that we can learn and we can see and we can role play together and we can analyze it. So as I said, in this program, you could actually get somewhere and say, hey, this is the truth for all departments. Like this is the persona, right? Then how each one connects to the feeling, that's very personal, right? And then the other thing is like really the synchronicity between organizations. And that's exactly what we said before, that cultures are broken because of the hierarchy. Each one tries to push for their own department, but not for the sake of the company that serves actually the customer. So if everyone would just align on what the customer really wants and go serve them, that would solve it partly, but also the organization need to move instead of like, cutting each other. It needs to be more synchronized about how do we work together. So play can be a way to dissolve those two conflicts, the gap between the company and the customer, and the gap between the different departments and how they come to decision making. Again, that's why I brought this participatory future in simulations, because you say, hey, we have a scenario. There's like a press crisis, or we have a scenario, there is like a legal lawsuit against the company, and we want now to react to this, or something positive, there's something good that is happening that really affects our persona, and we want to jump on this trend. What does it mean now for the whole organization over time? How would we align to it? And this simulation is not something new. Companies are doing it, right? Like, BMW has been doing saving a lot of money, just by using synthetic users, and there's like ways to already integrate this scenario simulation, and there's ways to bring more empathy to your leadership and build up on this scenario planning. What's relatively new is really to kind of company transformation and leadership transformation through using simulations and role play that are utilizing AI. And in some cases, XR is important, especially when you want to kind of have more presence and immersion in the situation itself, especially when it's like something that is really hard to imagine if you're not there.
Yeah, you I think what you're saying here is that with it is all based on what you're actually incentivizing as well. Like inside the system. Because if you're saying that a company is hierarchical in nature, and let's say that you were to put the different levels of the organization in the same room, you have the director of a company and like an individual contributor in the same room, you almost have in your mind, it's not said out loud, but in a place which is incentivizing this hierarchy, you have more points for the same words that a leader says versus someone that is new to the company saying. Like they might be saying the same thing, but there's more leverage, like more impact and more like seriousness, I guess, put into the words said by a leader versus someone else. And I feel like that's where it makes it harder to align together, because you have to figure out within this hierarchy how can you still say let anyone speak if they're saying something that is genuinely moving the ball forward for the company, because it's impacting how a customer's experience is, how it's improving them. Then they should just listen to whoever is saying it. It should not matter who's saying it. And I think AI is interesting in that way, because if you use it for um, creating simulations, you are sort of getting everyone else, regardless of who the person is, in on a third party, someone that's outside of you, to get together and agree in some ways. At the
Yeah.
same time, you need to be able to ask questions. Like you can't blindly agree because there's a date, there's an LLM in front of you that's just blurting out answers, and that's something that happens a lot in already, because you are kind of off. You're kind of offshooting or outsourcing your brain power to this model that's in front of you and just agreeing exactly to what it says about a question that you ask it.
Right. I mean, I think there's a few things here. So first, you're right, and that's like inside the organization, there needs to be an openness for this transformational change in the organization and on a mindset. That's really like why I design it and think about it as a mindset, because leaders right now are scared. I mean, if I was owning a company that is more than 100 employees right now in this market, I would be like, what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Like, obviously, startups always in the first stage, it's always scary, but like, you need some predictions of the future. It's so hard right now. It's impossible to know how things would change. Um, like in many ways, you want to be on the right mindset as this change happens. And I think because of that, play and simulation are suddenly welcome because they're a way to meditate these risks, right? That's what we need right now. I try to, so when I was thinking about how do I place it, I try to, I'm not a writer, but I try to create a guidebook. I did like the guide to the play economy. There's like really in the beginning, I try to understand what's the foundations here. Like it's okay, embracing the depth of play. That was like one of the elements that we really placed in the beginning, that play throughout history, we said it's not, it's childish, it's fun, and now we want to take it seriously and to really understand the convergence of play and work and education. Really, like how now we learn experientially, we learn from emotional insights. No matter how much data we have, this is something that the AI can't do for us. It can't feel for us. That's what makes us so human, and we are able to even feel for more. The other day, I'm using an AI called Bordy. Bordy is an AI that does the connection between people, right? And it's really functional. It talks in this Australian voice. You call it on the phone, and it knows people in its network. It says, Michael, who you need right now is this guy. I'll just say, sorry.
What happened?
Okay, so I did that to Bordy, and Bordy said, Michael, is everything okay? I said, I just hit my toenail. And Bordy said, I'm sorry to hear that. But you saw the pain in my face, and sorry for faking it, but just for the decision, you reacted, oh, what happened? Like you felt the pain. And that's what makes us human. That's the difference between us and Bordy and or any other AI. They cannot feel our pain in that moment. This idea, this zooming into this possibility that makes so much. And I think that when you understand that as a founder, as a owner of a company in the zeitgeist of AI, you understand, oh, how I zoom into this ability now in my company. How do I really, it's not just a buzzword, emotional intelligence and growing it, making people more empathetical, like people told me about empathy before. No, no, no. It's really like how do you bring this entering another perspective, becoming the customer, this, how do you bring it into your organization, and how do you allow leaders of different departments to suddenly swap roles, and how do you allow the intern to work with the simulation and to experience being the CEO and what they have done. This knowledge is very valuable for you. This intern might be the closest person in this whole organization to your target audience. And they might actually tell you something you forgot for 20 years already that is the reason why your company exists. So this ability to role play inside the organization, it's not just like something for the ping pong table for the fun time. It becomes the core of what moves the organization.
I want last question on this, man. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. Is what can method acting teach you about this process? How do method actors think through the process to help someone that is building a company or in a corporate world embody more of these roles based on whoever it might be the person in within the company, the customer. How can we use method acting?
You start with doing the methodologic research, like the really in-depth research. Then after you have the research about your persona, your character, you think into yourself and say, when was I in a situation like this? How would it feel? Can I evoke this emotion again? How would I do it? Do I need to smell something? The chicken soup of my mom, the smell of cinnamon. Do I need to go somewhere? Do I need to hear the train rails? Do I need to stand in a really high place? Do I need to be cold? Do I need to carry a baby? Like, what do I need to do to get closer to this feeling? Right? How do I bring myself closer to this discomfort, to the pain points of my customer? For real, not like here. Anytime you talk about the customer or with the customer, that's great, but that's not it. You have to really try and see, how do I talk as the customer? How do I feel as the customer?
So emotion plus experience creates the memory.
And it gives you insights from within, which is really interesting as experiential learning, right? We suddenly understand and we get into insight. We think about experiential learning, about learning a new skill, but experiential learning can really help us in focusing our positioning, our sales efforts, our product feature prioritizations.
Yeah, I mean that's why just moving to a different country to learn the language within that country is so powerful because you are you have to embody and you're there
Exactly.
experiencing the everyday thing.
Right. It's true for language. in relationship, right? You learn languages in relationship through this. So it's the experience of living the life through this realm.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Michael. It's very unique. Your perspective is unique from the way you've come and where you've come from, and now how you're applying it, and it's come full circle. It's amazing to see that.
Thank you so much, Shatak. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope that we get a chance to do some more of those conversations.